Tapping the power of IBP, or integrated business planning. I'm joined by two business advisors with Oliver Wight. Andrea Montecchi. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, Bob.
And Ben Sellers. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Bob.
Let me start out by asking you just what is IBP? What is integrated business planning anyway? Give us a definition.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. It's really about building trust and capability in the organization. If you think about it today, a lot of the issues inside of a company are we publish an annual budget, and the day it's published, it's obsolete. So how do we realign all the functions around the changing realities of the business? How do we get everybody on the same game plan? IBP is really about running the business. It's the leadership's process to realign the business as things are changing. So every 30 days, you get to say, what's changed and how does it impact how we go forward? And then what's really powerful about it is it gets everybody back on the same page to those new priorities and realities.
Well, it sounds like a very powerful tool. Not a new one necessarily, but certainly one that's maybe getting more traction these days. What are some of the present trends you see out there for IBP transformation projects? Andrea, maybe you could address that.
Absolutely. So in that dynamic environment in which all companies and we operate today, it's the aspect of change. And change, while delivering both the annual business plan, the quarterly results that so many companies are tracking fervently, but then the strategic plans themselves and linking them together. And so what we see is that companies that outperform have a means by which they link those and operationalize their strategy and their day-to-day execution. And so that becomes the focus, the driving factor has been alluded to in terms of how they manage the business. And then the trends that the way they manifest themselves in today's environment often generate from the unpredictable nature of where we are, right? As a result of COVID, the supply chain challenges that presented themselves manifest themselves now in things like cash and liquidity pressure that have a very short timeline on them. So the desire and need for fast implementation and solutions is alive and well.
So you would see a direct line between crises such as COVID and the uptick in acceptance of IBP. Is that what
you're saying? Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, not everyone's doing it. Certainly it's we are seeing quite a bit of it, but for those who are not embarking on such projects right now and want to get started, what might differentiate a successful IBP transformation from an unsuccessful one? Ben?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's several attributes to this. Is first of all, don't treat it as a supply chain initiative. This is a business initiative to run the whole business. The problem is in many companies, supply chain is the only ones holding the stuff up today. So the second thing I would say is that it's about people. Many people get hung up on all the mechanics of the process, but ultimately this is a people process, right? It's about, why aren't we using the official demand plan to run the supply piece? Why is finance doing their own planning? It's because there's been a fundamental breakdown of trust in the data and the people and the processes. And so to really make it work, it's got to be about the right people. It's people that can help solve issues and change agents and form things as decisions effectively for the business to drive it. That requires, leadership engagement in the process as well, because many of the key issues that are coming up in IBP require their direct decision-making and engagement to really realign the business and get it. So I like to think there's no more important decision than the key players you put in the key roles to run the business. And that would really differentiate them. I think finally, I would close with the leadership team needs to understand what will be different and why this is worth their while. I see so many people embark on it because they heard it's a nice thing to do without really understanding what is it going to be able to deliver for the business. So the leadership team specifically needs to be able to very well articulate that. That's when you get the resources assigned and the attention to the process that it really needs in order to be successful.
So you need to make a clear value proposition from the very start. It seems like this is the ideal way to bring down what are referred to as organizational silos, where each of these functional departments is making their own decisions, coming up with their own numbers, not propagating those across the organization. As IBP, the word integrated, the I in IPB certainly seems to be aiming directly at that practice, right?
Absolutely. It's trying to get people to change their mindset from taking care of my department to how do we do what's best for the business. And
Yeah.
the process is very much centered on that.
Well, let's talk technology, which of course is an extremely vague word. So I'd like to drill down into exactly what we mean by that. But what role does technology play today in most successful IBP implementations? Andrea?
Yeah, so piggybacking on what Ben just articulated, it's a supporting role, right? And so what we find often is that with the incredible capabilities that most technology platforms come with in terms of granularity and statistical modeling and incorporating detail, there tends to be a tendency to overfocus on what the tool can deliver and under prioritize the behavioral the people change aspect of it. And to illustrate the point, very often what we find is, and we'll use a theme here today on the demand front, when we are looking at things like demand planning functionality and those types of elements, you'll often find that there's a great deal of scrutiny on the product of the demand planning process, the accuracy and those types of things. However, behaviorally, either due to cultures within the corporation, presence and direction from leadership, or many of the other pressures that exist, we may not be bringing forward the information in a concise, direct, and explicit manner so that facilitates expedient decision-making. There's a lot of questioning and challenging of the data and understanding who's responsible for doing what, et cetera, that takes away from the basic question that says, is it good enough for us to make smart decisions to? And if it's not, then what do we have to do in order to change it?
Mhm.
And so we get mired in the detail rather than some of the elemental things that are necessary in order to facilitate that IBP process change. And that's just one example. It exists in all functions.
Yeah, interesting. I ask about technology. We end up talking about people ultimately.
Exactly.
I mean, technology is certainly important, but not without the human element. Ben, what is your perspective on this? The role of technology in IBP implementations today?
What I see is there's very capable packages out there, but they become the pacing item and a distraction. They're expensive. They take years to implement. And IBP should be a process you can stand up in months. And so I see it delaying because of the way it's applied, and maybe that's too powerful what you need, but I see it delaying, and people are striving for this level of integration that they think is going to provide efficiency, but it delays the project for a year or two. And there's a lot of business value that could come during that time. So don't make this a science project, right? Focus on getting results faster that are less perfect. And I think the other thing I see is that people are trying to extend their horizon to conform to IBP best practice. They're doing that by just taking the infrastructure of the SKU planning they have and trying to go out farther in time. And the best practice here really is to embrace an aggregate planning mindset. So when you get out, like if I'm selling markers in the marketplace, 2 years from now, do I really care what color that market is from an IBP perspective? Or what am I really trying to do is size the IBP market and do it. So I'm not saying get rid of the SKUs. I'm just saying the wrong way to extend the horizon, which is what many of the software companies are doing today, is just by taking that SKU backbone and extending it. And you think about high velocity businesses where you have lots of innovation. I mean, maybe 80% of the SKUs you're going to sell next year don't even exist, right? So it becomes a flawed model. It slows it down, and there's lots of technical challenges around doing it. And so aggregate planning is another example of this, where just building on what Andrea was saying about, accuracy and things of that nature, this SKUs give you a false precision around the planning. Well,
and moving out the horizon certainly can be valuable, but we're at a point now where we're talking about shortening planning horizons just because of the unpredictability of demand. And so I guess, does IBP embrace both possibilities where you can still have a fairly long horizon for long-term planning, but you're able to bring it down to a shorter term and execute on changes more quickly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think what you end up finding in companies, the trends that we're seeing, companies that are more successful, do have the extended planning horizon at an IBP level. It's also a senior management total business level planning. And then the detailed information, near-term horizon, can and should be arguably delegated to those talented people and processes within the organization that handle more of the tactical planning horizon. So they do work together. I would argue that IBP as a continuum of process and information certainly embraces and enables all of it. But when you think about what decisions are being made where in the organization and how are they effectively being made in a timely manner, those lie in different portions of the organization most of the time.
Well, thank you both for those insights into where IBP is today and just what it does for the organization. I really appreciate your time. I do want to take a moment, though, to ask you more specifically about Oliver Wight and its role in this today. What differentiates Oliver Wight in its ability to execute on successful IBP transformations? Andrea?
Yeah, thanks for that, Bob. I really appreciate the time this morning. In summary, so all of us are not only practitioners, having practiced and developed IBP in our own industry lives prior to becoming part of Oliver Wight, but we've also held many of these senior level and executive positions. And so it gives us an opportunity to come in with a perspective that appreciates a sense of urgency, the significance of process and people transformation, and the investment it takes in order to do this successfully. And we, as business advisors within companies that we partner with, are there directly. And so we are able to build the relationships and understand through experience in deployment with these clients at an intimate level what their needs are, not just the IBP process, but how does it fit their company, their needs, and their situation to be most effective.
Ben, a quick comment from you, a little bit more about Oliver Wight, how it's adopted these trends.
Well, I just think we have an advantage here. First of all, we invented this process. We named it. We wrote the first book on it back in the 80s. We've been doing this longer than anybody. We have a toolkit that our very experienced advisors use that I think is unmatched, from the education to how to design it, the templates, everything. And then we also have the software. We've had the software since the 90s that helps stand this up under this aggregate model that takes weeks, not years, to implement. So the companies really get the value out of this. So what we're really good at is taking all the mystery out of this and bringing resources you couldn't possibly create on your own inside of a company to help you do it fast, efficiently, and correctly, with all the views and best practices that you would expect, and help you move to that maturity very, very quickly. We're very skilled at that.
Well, again, IBP, not necessarily a new concept, but certainly the thing that a lot of companies are turning to today to deal with the uncertainties and the crises of the moment and the future as well. Thank you so much, both of you, Andrea Montecchi and Ben Sellers of Oliver Wight. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you, Bob.